The morning mist hung low over the Welsh hills as young Dafydd guided his flock toward fresh grazing land beyond the rocky outcrop. Among the scattered boulders grew a solitary tree, its dark evergreen needles glistening with dew, bright scarlet berries clustering like drops of blood against the foliage. The sheep spread across the hillside, their bells creating a gentle chorus in the still air. One ewe, more adventurous than the rest, stretched her neck toward the low-hanging branches, lips working at the tempting red fruit. Within moments of swallowing, her legs buckled. Foam bubbled from her mouth as her body seized, hooves scraping desperate furrows in the wet earth. The shepherd boy rushed forward, but the animal's eyes had already glazed, her final breath rattling through clenched teeth. Dafydd knelt beside the corpse, his fingers brushing the crushed berries and torn leaves scattered nearby. A sharp, bitter scent, like almonds left too long in the sun, rose from the broken foliage. The other sheep had already retreated, their instinct sharper than curiosity. The tree stood unchanged, its remaining berries gleaming innocently in the strengthening light, waiting for the next victim. The sheep's carcass grew cold in the morning mist, its rigid limbs a testament to the ew's lethal embrace. Across the moor, where stone circles marked sacred ground, a Celtic druid knelt beside an ancient yew, his bronze knife scraping pale curls from its heartwood. The tree's roots plunged through a burial mound, drinking from soil enriched by generations of the dead. His weathered hands shaped the wood into a crude figure, hollow eyes, skeletal ribs, arms outstretched in blessing or curse. Each stroke released the tree's bitter scent, the toxic dust settling on his robes. Behind him, initiates gathered mistletoe from oak branches, while he alone dared harvest from the death tree, his lips moving in protective chants passed down through bloodlines. The finished idol gleamed with fresh oil, its surface etched with spirals mirroring the tree's twisted grain. During the new moon ceremonies, priests would place it at the threshold between worlds, life and death, healing and harm. Warriors touched the idol before battle, seeking the ew's dual gift, protection for themselves, annihilation for enemies who faced their poisoned arrows. The same deadly sap that felled the shepherd's sheep now guided Roman hands across Europe's battlefields. In workshops scattered from Germania to Britannia, bowyers selected yew logs with ritualistic precision, heartwood on the belly, sapwood on the back, their fingers slick with protective oils. Each stroke of the draw knife released toxic dust that could paralyze an unwary craftsman's lungs. Beyond the Rhine, Gallic warriors crushed yew bark between stone mortars, mixing the pulp with boar fat until it formed a thick tar-like poison. They painted this death paste onto iron arrowheads with badger hair brushes, careful not to let a single drop touch bare skin. One scratch from such an arrow sent Roman soldiers into convulsions, foam bubbling between blue lips. The yew bough itself became Rome's most feared import, a 6-foot arc of compressed death that could drive an arrow through bronze armour at 200 paces. Welsh longbowmen discovered that storing their weapons in damp yew shavings increased their killing power, the wood absorbing its own poison like a snake renewing its venom between strikes. The Gallic warriors who had dipped their arrows in yew extract now faced a bitter irony. In 53 BCE, their aging king Catuvolcus watched Roman cavalry thunder through the Eburones' sacred forests. His co-ruler Ambiorix had fled into the Germanic wilderness, but Catuvolcus, joints stiffened by 70 winters, could not run. The bronze cup trembled in his weathered hands. He crushed fresh yew needles between his palms, releasing their acrid oils into heated wine. The same poison that had felled Roman scouts would now serve as his final act of sovereignty. Caesar's legions had burned every granary, slaughtered every cow. His people scattered like autumn leaves. The liquid scorched his throat, metallic, bitter, final. Roman soldiers discovered him 3 days later, rigid beneath an oak tree, foam dried at the corners of his mouth. His scribe Diviciacus recorded the symptoms: dilated pupils, blue-tinged lips, fingers locked around the empty cup. Caesar himself documented this death in his commentary, noting how the barbarian king chose the coward's escape rather than honourable surrender. Far from the battlefield where Catuvolcus chose his fate, another death unfolds in Rome's marble halls. The senator adjusts his purple-trimmed toga, reaching for the silver cup his trusted slave presents. The conspirator watches from behind a curtain, fingers trembling as residual yew-powder burns beneath his fingernails. The evening light catches the wine surface. Nothing betrays the poison within. The first sip burns cold. The senator's throat constricts around metallic ash flooding his palate. His pupils dilate. The cup crashes against mosaic tiles, wine spreading like spilled blood. Taxine alkaloids surge through his bloodstream, paralyzing cardiac muscle fibers. His heart stutters, skips, then hammers wildly. The conspirator counts 100 heartbeats until collapse, just as the Greek texts promised. Guards burst through bronze doors to find their master convulsing on imported silk cushions. Foam bubbles between blue lips. His physician arrives too late. No antidote exists for Yu's embrace. The conspirator has vanished into Rome's labyrinthine streets, leaving only faint traces of ground bark on the wine pitcher's rim. Another political enemy eliminated, another death blamed on sudden illness. While Roman conspirators perfected their craft in marble halls, a different kind of poison master emerged in the kingdom of Pontus. Mithridates VI crouched beside a writhing prisoner in his walled garden, pressing 2 fingers against the man's throat. The pulse hammered, skipped, then stuttered to nothing. On his clay tablet, the king scratched precise notations: onset time, muscle spasms, the peculiar blue tinge spreading across the victim's lips, or the condemned man had swallowed exactly 3 crushed yew seeds mixed with honey water. Foam bubbled between his clenched teeth, tinged pink with blood from his bitten tongue. His pupils contracted to pinpoints. The king leaned closer, studying how the prisoner's fingers curled inward like dying spiders. Each symptom joined hundreds of others, recorded in cuneiform across stacks of tablets, a library of death built one convulsion at a time. This obsession sprouted from terror. Mithridates had watched his own father collapse at a banquet, poisoned by courtiers. Now he consumed tiny doses of every toxin he could acquire, building immunity drop by lethal drop. His experiments with yew revealed its terrible precision. Too little merely induced vomiting, too much killed before useful observations could be made. The perfect assassination dose lay somewhere between 2 and 4 seeds, depending on the victim's weight. Medieval knowledge of poisons had spread from ancient texts into the shadowed corners of village life, where wise women kept their deadly secrets alongside healing remedies. In a cramped cottage room, rushlight flickering against damp stone walls, a young woman clutched her swollen belly while the midwife ground dark green yew needles with a worn pestle, releasing their acrid resin into the mortar. The bitter tea scalded her throat as she forced it down, tasting of pine and decay. Within minutes, violent cramps seized her abdomen, doubling her over as cold sweat beaded across her forehead. The midwife's promise of relief twisted into agony, her muscles locked rigid, breath coming in shallow gasps as numbness crept from her fingertips up through her trembling arms. Blood pooled beneath her shift, soaking through the straw mattress as her body rejected both poison and child. Her pupils dilated to black pools while foam gathered at the corners of her blue-tinged lips. The taxine alkaloids shut down her heart's rhythm, each beat more erratic than the last, until silence filled the room, broken only by the midwife's muttered prayers. The midwife's fatal brew had claimed another victim, but in medieval England, U's toxicity served a different purpose. Churchyard soil needed protection from grazing livestock. Parish councils planted yews around burial grounds, their poisonous foliage creating natural barriers that kept cattle and sheep from trampling consecrated earth where the dead awaited resurrection. Saxon stonemasons carved crosses beneath yew canopies older than Christianity itself. These trees witnessed Viking raids, Norman conquests, and plague pits dug in haste. Their roots probed deeper with each generation, threading through femurs and rib cages, drawing nutrients from decomposing flesh. Villagers believed the trees absorbed souls, their blood-red berries proof of this unholy feast. By 1307, a Winchester parish register recorded 17 deaths from the churchyard tree. Children mistook the sweet aerials for treats. Desperate souls harvested leaves for suicide drafts. Even gravediggers suffered. Their spades, nicking roots, released toxic sap that blistered skin. The yew stood unmoved, its branches creaking with the weight of centuries and corpses. The same ancient yews that sheltered graveyards across Britain also grew wild beside cottages, their twisted trunks leaning over garden walls. In 1712, a cobbler's daughter in Surrey spotted crimson berries gleaming through the morning frost. The 5-year-old reached through the stone wall's gap, her small fingers closing around the jewel-bright aerials that tasted of sticky sweetness. She swallowed 3 berries whole before the first seed cracked between her teeth. The bitter almond taste made her gag, but the poison had already begun its work. Her mother found her 20 minutes later, sprawled on the kitchen's flagstone floor, pupils blown wide as coins, chest barely rising. The child's lips had turned blue-grey, matching the colour of winter twilight. The village physician arrived to find the family gathered around the dying girl, her grandmother pressing dried herbs against unresponsive lips. He recognized the symptoms immediately. The seeds contained taxine, a cardiac poison that disrupted the heart's electrical impulses. Within an hour, the child's shallow breaths ceased entirely. The cobbler burned every yew branch within reach of his property that same night. The same toxic knowledge that filled a child's lungs with shallow breath now filled a magistrate's quill with damning words. In 1672, the village of Ashford gathered around a makeshift scaffold where Agnes Whitmore stood accused, a leather pouch of dried yew leaves discovered beneath her floorboards alongside vials of mercury and crushed beetles. The parchment crackled as the clerk read her confession. 3 husbands dead, each complaining of metallic taste and failing vision before their hearts seized. She'd learned the recipe from her grandmother. Steep the leaves until the water turns amber, strain through linen, mix with honey to mask the bitterness. The crowd pressed closer, smelling wood smoke and fear. Though Agnes burned that October morning, the yew's reputation spread like smoke through cottage kitchens and tavern whispers. Mothers warned daughters away from churchyard trees. Herbalists buried their knowledge deeper. Even as arsenic and strychnine became the poisoner's new tools, villagers still crossed themselves when passing ancient yews, remembering the silent killer that grew in God's own ground.